All right, we're going to be doing a commentary on a video, which is a 9/11 Commission edit of 9/11 Commission panelist Bob Kerrey interviewing former Clinton administration official and former Defense Secretary William Cohen. So let's see what we got. Hold on a minute.
Senator Kerrey. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, nice to see you again.
Good to see you, Senator.
First of all, let me say, as you were introducing yourself, I had not, until I prepared for this hearing, realized, and you reinforced it, that you were the father of the Special Operations Command, and it must have given you a considerable amount of pride to see how effective Special Operations units were in Afghanistan, Iraq, and according to the reports today in the Hindu Kush, again, trying to run down bin Laden as we speak. And
Senator Kerrey, you may recall one of the complaints that used to come from the Pentagon and the executive branch is that Congress engages in too much micromanagement. I think that was the case, and also the reformation of the Joint Chiefs of Staff with Goldwater Nichols of macro management. But I thought it played a very important role.
Certainly, both of those were, and they want you to micromanage when they've got something they want you to support. So, but let me also say, with great respect, I do think that I do think that in '98 that a special operations unit with an element of surprise could have had a tremendous impact at that particular point. It's a judgment call you got to make. It's a much different situation than it is today, and I appreciate that very much. Look, one of the problems I think that I have with this whole thing is that we were attacked on the 11th September 2001 by the same people that attacked the Cole on the 12th of October 2000, by the same people who attempted to attack the Sullivans a few months earlier, by the same people who were responsible for multiple millennium attacks in 1999, by the same people who attacked our embassies on the 7th of August 1998, and now, as we understand it, by the same people who had previous attacks back through the 1990s, perhaps up to and including the World Trade Center bombing one. So it's not just that that we were attacked successfully by 19 men with less than $500,000 utterly. I mean, they just defeated every single defensive mechanism we had up in place. It's that this is the same group that had attacked us on many other occasions in the past. And that's why I keep coming to the question, why would we have a presidential directive in place in 1998 that said that the Department of Defense and our military was going to be used principally for a response if we were attacked in a local and state situation, and to support what the Department of Justice was doing? I don't understand why the military wasn't given a priority and a primary role in the fight against not just terrorism, but the fight against Osama bin Laden. I mean, I presume you've seen the declaration of war that he released on the 23rd of February 1998. That was very precise. Again, issued by somebody who had demonstrated not just a willingness to kill Americans, but the capacity to kill Americans. And every single time I heard the administration come up before the Intelligence Committee that I was on, we were just trying to keep doing what you had done for years before, it was, we're going to send the FBI to investigate this stuff. And I would say, my God, I don't understand this. They killed airmen in Kobar Towers. They attacked our facilities in East Africa. They attacked our sailors on the Cole. I don't understand, and still today don't understand, why the military wasn't given a dominant role. And I wonder, if you're looking back on it today, do you think we underutilized the military during the 1990s and the war against...
Before William even gets a chance to answer some of this, I want to be quite clear regarding William Cohen, who is the former Secretary of Defense during Bill Clinton's administration, and he led the Defense Department's efforts to counter terrorism. During Cohen's tenure, he actually was targeted specifically by Osama bin Laden during his fatwa in 1998, after the bombings of the East Africa embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania. Cohen was actually a key player on the national security team that worked to respond to the attacks of the embassy and the USS Cole. And according to him, he prevented other attacks as well. But Kerrey asks a very specific and illuminating question about why the US military wasn't given a prominent or broader role in conducting defense responses toward Al-Qaeda, specifically between the periods of 1996 and 1998, right? Khobar Towers, USS Cole bombing, embassy bombings, okay? 1996, you had the first fatwa by bin Laden, where he directed his fatwa to just the US military stationed in Mecca and Medina in Saudi Arabia. In 1998, upon his return to Afghanistan in 1996, he then expanded that fatwa, headed under Ayman al-Zawahiri of the Egyptian Islamic Jihad and Ahmed Rafai Taha of Egyptian Islamic Jihad, in which now they involved Americans wherever you find them, civilians or military. So now the threat was global instead of one specific concentrated area. So US targets, which tried to influence or persuade Clinton to use the US military to engage Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. And he thought, and this is according to bin Laden's son, he thought that after the embassy bombings, the United States military under Clinton would conduct attacks in Afghanistan, and he didn't budge. Now, according to former CIA case officers, such as Billy Waugh, the legendary Billy Waugh, while bin Laden was even in Khartoum, and we're talking about 1992, 93, Billy Waugh is famous for the capture of Ilich Ramirez Sanchez, otherwise known as Carlos the Jackal. Him and Cobra Black were involved with the capture of one of the most dangerous terrorists in the world at the time. The CIA knew bin Laden was in Khartoum and knew that he had a home there. Now, according to Billy Waugh, he used to sometimes jog on this road where bin Laden would be traveling by with his bodyguards, and said that he got within meters of him where he probably could have killed him, in which Waugh said he probably could have killed him with a rock. He tried to get authorization from the Clinton administration to apprehend him and rendition him back to the States, and he was denied authorization by the National Security Council and the State Department. According to an article on the National Post, written by Zachary Halusak of the Washington Examiner, in which a CIA official said that Bill Clinton blocked in order to kill bin Laden. And this comes from a documentary called The Longest War, which is on Showtime, in which former CIA Station Chief Bob Greiner, who is based in Islamabad, Pakistan, explained that the agency was permitted to engage in lethal activity against Osama bin Laden, but could not perform a strike with the explicit purpose of killing him under the terms of the memorandum of notification enacted by Bill Clinton. According to Greiner, and this is a direct quote, "We were being asked to remove the threat to the United States essentially with one hand tied behind our backs." And that's just one problem. You know, here are former CIA officials, case officers, who basically said they could have killed bin Laden in the early 90s.
In this case, radical Islamists led by Osama bin Laden.
First of all, I've seen your comments about the need to declare war against al-Qaeda. We were at war with al-Qaeda. We weren't declaring it as such, and the president going to Congress.
The official declaration of war was given by CIA Director George Tenet in 1999. Just to add some additional info on that.
We're saying let's declare war against al-Qaeda. I take your point about bin Laden being very precise. He was very precise in issuing a personal fatwa against me. I was put on the list. There was a price tag. There were several attempts, which I don't have to go into details about, going after me. So I was very much aware that this was a war that had been declared against the United States, including members of the President's cabinet personally, putting us at risk as well as our military personnel. The use of the military, the only use I could have seen in terms of could we have done more against bin Laden, was really talk about putting a massive force into Afghanistan. Over the objection. You've heard this morning, and it's something that I had to take into account. Could we, in fact, take a much more aggressive military operation against bin Laden without the support of Pakistan or any of the neighboring countries? General Zinni's name has been surfaced on several occasions here. You know, when you recommend people to advise you, and I was the one who recommended that General Zinni be the commander of the CENTCOM. You look at their background, you look at their war records, you look at how they've conducted themselves, and you hopefully trust their judgment. General Zinni made a number of recommendations, which I took to heart because he was of the opinion that had we taken certain types of military action, it would have been, quote, ineffective, counterproductive. He was the same general who recommended that we not overreact when there was a military coup in Pakistan, saying, wait a minute, I've worked with this general. I think we may be able to persuade him to be much more supportive than he has been, than we think in the past. As a result of that kind of relationship that General Zinni had with General Musharraf and President Musharraf, later President Musharraf, we were able to help thwart attacks during the millennium. So you have to, at some point, put some judgment in the experts that you call upon to give you advice. Could I have second-guessed Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Shelton? Yes. Could I have second-guessed General Zinni? Did I have reason to, based upon my experience with them? And the answer was no. I put a lot of faith in their recommendations and their judgment, and I never found them, quote, risk-averse. They really were more mission successful in their orientation, saying, if we do this, we're likely to succeed. If we do the following, we're likely to fail. Those were the kinds of decisions we had to make. So what could have been done? We had lethal authority. We were not, Sandy Berger said, we weren't trying to send simply a summons to bin Laden in Afghanistan. We were trying to kill him or.
Okay, now let me add a little bit of more substance to what Cohen has said. Now, regarding information, now this is information coming from third-hand sources in Afghanistan regarding where bin Laden was staying, and he was staying under the umbrella of the Taliban. However, the Taliban used him for his money to grow and to construct training bases such as Tanak Farms and also training camps in the Patkia province as well as Kandahar. Now, in response to the embassy bombings, there was a military strike, so to speak, and this is where things get a little sketchy, and I'm going to explain it the best I can. The Taliban really didn't want bin Laden there because of the extreme differences of their theological backgrounds. And I'm not going to get into deep context with this because it would explain some time, but I've explained it in previous videos before. Regarding the Taliban's hospitality toward al-Qaeda bin Laden, there was a high-level meeting of Taliban between the Taliban High Council of Pakistan that visited the Taliban leader in Afghanistan, Muhammad Mullah Omar, in which bin Laden was the main topic. And they said that because during the after the embassy bombings, they were visited by Saudi General Intelligence Director Prince Turki bin Faisal of Saudi Arabia, in which Faisal told Mullah Omar that it would be in their best interest to hand over bin Laden to the Saudis, and if not, they could go to the governments of Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, or Qatar. But they found out that he would be tried in the United States for his terrorist campaign against U.S. Targets in Africa and in Saudi Arabia. So the Taliban held a meeting and said that this would pose a problem, that they would love nothing to hand over bin Laden and get rid of the headache. But if they do that and he goes into the hands of the West, the Muslims, the Ummah, the global Muslim community would depose the Taliban as nothing more than apostates or kafir. Well, apostates anyway. Munafiq in the Arabic. So, because Mullah Omar rejected Prince Turki Faisal's offer, the United States conducted an operation called Operation Infinite Reach, which was the code name for the American cruise missile strikes on al-Qaeda bases in Khost province of Afghanistan and the Al-Shifa pharmaceutical factory in Khartoum, Sudan on August 20th, 1998. The attacks were launched by the U.S. Navy, which was ordered by President Clinton. And this was a problem because the pharmaceutical factory wasn't linked to any al-Qaeda. There was no al-Qaeda link. And because of this, because Sudan is such a economically deprived country, which is the reason why they invited bin Laden, because he spent tens of millions on infrastructure under the tutelage of the National Islamic Front's leader, Hassan Tarabi. Bin Laden, when he was forced out of the country by the State Department, he blamed Tarabi because they thought he used him to build the infrastructure of the country. Now, the problem with the strikes was that it emboldened the Taliban to engage the United States and said that they planned to attack the United States. When the embassy bombings happened, it was National Security Advisor Sandy Berger who called bin Laden early in the morning on August 7th. And Clinton started a meeting of his group of national security advisors that included CIA Director Tenet, Sandy Berger, Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, Attorney General Janet Rito, and the Defense Secretary William Cohen. And the group's objective was to plan a military response to the East African embassy bombings. The intelligence on the ground would come from George Tenet and the CIA, as well as Michael Schur, who was then the chief of the bin Laden issue station, codenamed Alex Station, right? Schur was aggressive and wanted to bomb a ceremony that was in Afghanistan that he said that he had good intelligence on the ground where bin Laden was staying. I think it was a wedding or something like that. And it was rejected by Clinton, saying that he didn't want to risk offending the Saudis by bombing this wedding procession that may or may not have bin Laden in it. And this caused a problem. And, Cohen could say here that Clinton was basically aggressive in conducting attacks against bin Laden. However, as I told you before, you had CIA officers as well as this response by the Operation Infinite Reach that strictly was not the case that Cohen is suggesting here.
Anyone else who was there at
So that's a problem.
the time. That was, what they call a warning shot to the temple. We were trying to kill bin Laden. And anyone there that went to that camp. Did we have the kind of information that would have allowed us to get him later? We didn't see it. It was never recommended. And I can't account for everything that you've heard, but there was never a recommendation that came to the national security team that said, we've got a good shot at getting him, let's take military action and do it. The only other alternative would have been, could we have persuaded Pakistan, get out of the way, we're coming, we don't need your support, we're going to invade Afghanistan? I leave it to you, Senator Kerrey, and to others who have served in Congress. Do you think it's reasonable that under the circumstances that any president, including President Clinton, could have gone to Congress in October of 2000 and said, these people are trying to kill us, and now, therefore, we're going to invade Afghanistan and take them out? I don't think so. But there are, other members can disagree, a judgment call. You sat on the other side of that decision.
Okay, let me add some information here. This would have been a tough call, right? Now, can you imagine, like the State Department officials go to Pakistan, or the CIA goes to Pakistan and goes to the ISI and basically say, hey, listen, we want to conduct a capture or kill operation against bin Laden. Now, the ISI is not to be taken at face value as an honest organization, intelligence organization. They're one of the most nefarious, shadowy organizations. In fact, I'm probably going to do a podcast about the history of the ISI because people need to learn about the ISI and how nefarious that organization is. In fact, they have deep links with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and his family, including his brother Mohammed, in the Baluchi clan of Ramzi Youssef and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. It's really that deep. And also there's the alleged links linking the general director of the ISI, Mahmoud Ahmed, who gave money to a known ISI operative and terrorist, Omar Saeed Sheikh, who's a murderer and a kidnapper of U.S. and Western tourists for a price. And Ahmed gave $100,000 to Saeed Sheikh in order to give that money to one of the ringleaders of 9/11 attacks, Mohammed Atta. Just days prior to 9/11 attacks, Ahmed resigned from his post. I wonder why. Now, to reiterate on Cohen's statement about getting authorization from the Pakistan ISI to capture or kill bin Laden, yeah, I think Cohen's right here. Good luck with that one. Who knows if they were to, say, conduct a covert operation using the CIA Special Activities Division, right? Or using the U.S. diplomatic services, which were basically behind the capture of Ramzi Youssef in Pakistan. Who's to say that if they informed people of Pakistan, the officials there, that they wouldn't go to the ISI and the ISI would basically forewarn bin Laden about the operation? So, because the CIA doesn't trust the ISI and the ISI doesn't trust the United States.
Well,
So, I think Cohen's right here.
that presumes that the president would come to Congress and request an authorization for action there. But as you know, there have been many moments when the president doesn't request such authorization. Just
That's right, exactly right, because Operation Infinite Reach was not authorized by Congress.
does it.
Can I
So,
let me make one other point?
okay.
One other point. You remember Kosovo.
Yeah.
Here we had a campaign going on in Kosovo. I don't know how many times you came to the White House, but there were meetings after meetings with members of Congress coming down to the president saying, it's a bad idea. When are you going to get out? What's the exit strategy? How much is it going to cost us? We had to sustain a 78-day bombing campaign, frankly, without the support of Congress. And it was a successful campaign. And as a result of that, we saved a lot of lives. But I give you that as an example to say the notion that somehow President Clinton or even President Bush, absent 9/11, could have walked into the halls of Congress, say, declare war against al-Qaeda, I think is
Mr.
unrealistic.
Secretary, I say you're making my argument.
Right.
I mean, I supported what the president did in Kosovo. I supported what he did in Bosnia. I was in the minority in both times. But that
Bosnia was a disaster. I don't want to hear about it. Kosovo may not so, but Bosnia, by the way, that was one of the reasons why bin Laden and Al Qaeda hated the United States, because when there was racial aggression and slaughter, wholesale slaughter and genocide of the Muslim people by Slobodan Milosevic of Yugoslavia, and that there was one of the worst massacres in history, human history, happening in Bosnia, the global Muslim community got no response. In fact, the United Nations, actually, fruitless as they are, this is the biggest blunder in their history, and there were a number of them, regarding them leaving a camp in Bosnia. I think it was Herzegovina. I think I'm saying it wrong. Some camp where Slobodan Milosevic and Rado Mladic, the general of the army, basically it was Mladic, who basically said that the head of the United Nations, I forget his name, some Dutch guy, and he says, how dare you conduct a campaign against my army? Who the hell are you? And basically got no help from the United States, basically was left on his own and acted like a coward because he left the camp, and Milosevic committed a mass genocide of the men. I think it was over 7,000 people that were killed in his schoolyard. It was a factory. The women were raped and the children were slaughtered. It was just one of the worst massacres in human history, and some of the most depraved incidents. So Cohen, God's sakes, don't bring up Bosnia.
Didn't stop him from doing.
And by the way, bin Laden basically uses that and said that because of this, that they could not trust the United States. Had the United States intervened on the Muslims' behalf in Bosnia, they very well could have been no 9/11 or no embassy bombings, because of the neglect by even the Arab states to act on the behalf of the Muslim community in Bosnia. And yeah, you know what? That would be right. And if you're ignorant about what happened in Bosnia, take a look at that. You'll have an understanding of why the Muslims basically viewed the United States and the United Nations with very indifferent outlooks or eyes or opinions. And you can understand why, because of the mass amounts of genocide and atrocities that happened from it. And it's really just appalling. And I can understand why they disliked us very immensely.
Doing it.
But he
It
had
didn't
this,
st- the fact that it was difficult, the fact that it was hard, the fact even that at times it was unpopular, he believed in it and he rallied the American people to the cause.
he also rallied
He
allies.
didn't rally. He
No.
didn't do that with bin Laden.
But he also rallied allies to the cause. You had the NATO countries involved in Bosnia and Kosovo. You have
Oh my God! Look, opening a can of worms. I'm not going to go into it again. But man, yeah, it was a disaster.
after 9/11, you have him rallying the international community to help go into Afghanistan. Prior to that time, I dare say there is not a single country that would have been supporting the President of the United States declaring war and invading Afghanistan prior to 9/11. You can disagree with that judgment. I don't think there would be a single country, and I frankly think that Congress would have overwhelmingly rejected it.
I would disagree. I respectfully disagree. First of all, again, as I said, there are many instances where the president doesn't even come to Congress. I mean, Operation Just Cause in Panama, he didn't come to Congress and say, gee, is it okay to do that? Grenada, the president didn't come to Congress and said, is that okay to do it?
Right. No, hey, Kerry's right here, right? So this is the reason why, and this is an off-topic issue, but I think it's important to bring up. This is the reason why the United States is not part or co-signers of the Rome Statute, which is the International Criminal Courts in Hague, right, Netherlands. So because they have the judicial system is based on egregious crimes of aggression, crimes against humanity, crimes of aggression, and war crimes, right? So who are the biggest abusers of all three? The United States. All right. So there's I think it's 6 countries, and some of them are the United States, Israel, North Korea, Iraq, and I forgot the other 2. I think it's the Philippines and somebody else, that are not co-signers of the Rome Statutes. And the United States is the biggest absentee co-signer, right? It would make sense. And that's the reason why they don't go to Congress and basically ask for permission to invade a country. That's why they have this, legislation, which comes through the committee in the House and Senate, and basically under, a holiday or in late at night where people can't read the bill in time, and basically is passed without any stipulation or any any type of resolution against. And obviously, under the Authorization Use of Military Force Act, the United States basically doesn't need the approval of Congress anymore. It's worse now. I mean, the regulations are so lax in favor of the State Department and the absent the Department of Justice. I think the founding fathers, if they were alive, would ask us to revolt. And that's not an exaggeration.
Bosnia and Kosovo, the very examples that you cite, the president didn't have the support of Congress, and he went ahead and did it. I think he did the right thing. But the fact that it's unpopular, that it's difficult, that our allies are not necessarily with it, shouldn't deter a president who believes that what we have is a serial killer on our hands, who had begun killing us at least as early as 1993, who had issued a very specific declaration of war, calling Islamic men to join an Islamic army on the 23rd.
Okay, here's the thing, too, Kerry's not understanding, is that how is it possible that we can carry out a war using the U.S. military against a group with no nation, right? So they're not backed by any nation specifically. They're not acting on the laws of a country, all right? This is a terrorist group. It's an idea, all right? It's unprecedented that the director of the Central Intelligence, the DCI, George Tenet, can basically declare an act of war. That's that would be an act for the president, not the director of the CIA. Why is he calling for a declaration of war, which basically Bill Clinton wasn't against? And you just heard it from William Cohen. Oh, we were at war even before 1999, but it wasn't declared. I never heard anything like that. Never before in history, that we were at war with an organization without a country. Now, even after 9/11, we were at war with an idea, terrorism. We're at war with terrorism. What does that even mean? How is that even commonplace amongst American lingo?
Of February 1998.
Does that make sense? I mean, really, doesn't to me.
And then demonstrated that he had the capacity in a very sophisticated way on the 7th of August to carry out that threat. And what did we? I mean, we did not. We had a round in our chamber and we didn't use it. That's how I see it. And I don't know if it had prevented 9/11, but I absolutely do not believe that just because the commander-in-chief sits there and said, "Gee, this thing's unpopular, therefore I can't do it." I don't think that's a good argument.
Because he wasn't getting support in the National Security Council. Now, look, after the embassy bombings, Bill Clinton actually held a meeting about the rendition program, because not Bush, it was Clinton who authorized the rendition program. A lot of people get this wrong, and I've done a video about this recently about the rendition program. Go look at it. I did it on YouTube. It's in my playlists, right? So Clinton had a meeting with the CIA director, Bill Clinton, George Tenet. He also, in this meeting, had the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Hugh Sheldon, as well as Sandy Berger, and I'm going to say the vice president was there, regarding who would, and also the director of the FBI, Louis Freeh. So what Clinton, on the agenda, the briefing was that who would be in charge of renditioning, or who would want to rendition bin Laden back to the United States. And Clinton actually said that we could drone strike bin Laden. Now, this was unprecedented. Never before had we used drone strikes on anybody. And he told Tenet, would you be interested in capturing bin Laden in Afghanistan and rendition back to the United States? To which Tenet basically said, with irony here, Tenet said, well, the CIA is not in the doesn't do renditions. He said this in 1999. He said, we're not in the program of doing renditions. We're not to capture we're not a capture organization. We're going to kill him. In which the agenda was how to kill him. Well, let's use a drone strike, and everybody in that room was unfamiliar with drones at the time and said, "Do they work?" I think Lawrence Wilkerson was there, in which basically they said, "Would it work? Is it even feasible?" They were worried about casualties, innocent casualties, and whatnot. Just a short few years later, they didn't give a damn about casualties. They didn't give a damn about renditions. All that went through the roof with Bush. He authorized the CIA to do renditions. He authorized the CIA to do drone strikes, and they did them. And they did them even more under Obama. I mean, he was the drone strike king. So I found that to be quite amusing, by the way.
Senator Kerry, let me.
I know
That's interesting. Read The Dark Side by Jane Mayer. It's a great book.
Secretary Rumsfeld is going to use it here in a few minutes, and I'm going to be just as harsh with him. I don't
right.
buy it.
Well, Senator Kerry, let's go back. Let's
He
go
had
back
no-
to.
Look, I don't know if Kerry's aware of it. Clinton really did not have any type of approval from the national security team regarding the capture or kill of bin Laden and in the ways of how to kill him.
The Persian Gulf War, 91.
Yeah.
There
They were
you
even
had.
talking about trying to poison bin Laden, like they did with Ibn Khattab, like the Russians did with the Chechnyan Muslim leader Ibn Khattab in Chechnya when he was fighting the Soviets in the Balkans. They poisoned him through a letter. And Bill Clinton actually was confronted by, I forgot who it was, basically said we could try to poison bin Laden, but bin Laden was basically in Afghanistan insular from the outside world because the Taliban wouldn't allow him to have visitors anymore because they didn't want him to do interviews anymore because every interview he did would basically inflame the United States to respond in kind. And the Taliban at the time didn't want any invasion of the United States because they were at the time fighting against the Northern Alliance for control of the country.
Had Saddam Hussein
That's why bin Laden was a headache.
invading Kuwait. There you had the President of the United States, President Bush 41, going to the international community, gathering support, and then deciding to come to the Congress to get congressional support. Close call. You had, I think it passed the Senate by 4 votes under those extraordinary circumstances. But I would submit to you the notion that you would be able, in the fall of 2000, to have rallied the Congress and the country to invade Afghanistan and to have had the support of Pakistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, all of the other people in the region, I don't think is realistic. Judgment call,
He's
you
right.
can be faulted for that. I just don't think it was feasible.
Well, I just say for the record, I've been better to have tried and failed than not to have tried at all. And I think in this particular case, again, what you've got, the thing that's most troubling about 9/11 is that it was carried out by a group of people, the same group of people that had killed Americans the previous October, that had tried to kill Americans on the Sullivans just before that in the summer of 2000.
That's part of the millennium.
It's a serial series of events stretching back for a decade.
And
that's
would-
the problem.
and we would
with a
try-
decade.
The idea of bombing U.S. military stations came from a Boston al-Qaeda sleeper cell headed by Nabil al-Marab. Now, my co-researcher, Nelson Martin's DJ thermal detonator, and myself are probably the only people that I know of, I could be wrong about this, but that I know of that talks about Nabil al-Marab and the Boston al-Qaeda sleeper cell. I would implore anybody who's watching this video to go to DJ Thermal Detonator's channel and watch Jacob Maximum and the 1993 film to get a better understanding of who Nabil al-Marab was. I did a video about Nabil al-Marab, and it's in my video playlist as well. You could take a look at that as well. I did an article about him too, but the video is better. It explains about what entailed. Nabil al-Marab basically was an al-Qaeda associate, and he was followed by the Department of Justice inside the United States. He would basically come from Canada, where he was a taxi driver in Boston for years. He was in Afghanistan prior to that, along with a number of his associates. And one of the ideas he had was to bomb naval ships in Yemen. And he was the originator of that. So
Declaration of
got
war
the
by the
idea
guy
from.
who's leading the organization.
And we were trying to kill those members whenever we could find them. But you're not talking about people sitting in a city waiting to be attacked. These are, it's like mercury on a mirror. You're talking about individuals who can hide. I mean, let's look at what's taking place today. I point out again, you've got thousands of people on the ground in Afghanistan with the support of Pakistan, and we still are unable to track him down and to kill him.
But
Now,
if you look at the performance of the special operations units in northern Afghanistan and the war against Afghanistan, and they leveraged thousands of GI's effort. They were enormously effective.
I agree.
Likewise in Iraq, and likewise again right now in Afghanistan.
I agree. I think we owe them a tremendous amount of gratitude for all of the sacrifice they make and the training they have. That's the reason we are the finest in the world, because of that training. But
Well, what was the military objective on 20 August 1998?
the military objective was to kill as many people in those camps as we could, to take out the pharmaceutical plant because we had reason to believe, actionable intelligence.
But there were more men south of Kandahar than.
Okay, talking about the Al-Sifa pharmaceutical camp. This is what enraged the Taliban, because it basically was just a pharmaceutical warehouse that was not affiliated with Al-Qaeda. And the intelligence reports suggested this. But the intelligence reports were based on fictitious thoughts by the Central Intelligence Agency. And this is the reason why Mullah Omar said, we're declaring war on the United States. And he told this at in an interview, one of the rare interviews he ever did was Air America, in which he basically said that this was one of the reasons why the United States is evil, because they don't attack terrorists themselves, but they'll go after the weakest part of the countries. This is basically the elderly and the young. And we saw that with the first Gulf War, with the economic sanctions that killed 500,000 people in the food for oil program, in which Madeleine Albright later was interviewed by Jane Staley, in which Liz Stahl, in which she says to her during the part, he goes, do I think the price was worth it, regarding 500,000 women and children, men, old men were killed, in which he says, yes, I think the price was worth it. Okay, these people who call bin Laden and Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, the initial leader of the Islamic State in Levant, which was the Islamic State in Iraq, and the Wild Jamaat al-Tawhid, or Mullah Omar, the Taliban, or Ridwan Isamuddin of the Jemaah Islamiyah, they called them terrorists. But man, if that's going to be the terrorists, well, I'll steal a line from Ramzi Youssef during his sentencing phase, in which he told the judge that you're the terrorists. You're the ones we learned this from, and you're the ones that go and kill hundreds of thousands of people, even millions of people. Well, I mean, is he really wrong? Yeah, Ramzi Youssef is a terrorist. Yeah, he's a murderer. However, when the mirror is turned and it's looking directly at the person who's persecuting the terrorist, he's not going to like the reflection, because guess what? The United States killed 1 million people in Iraq based on false intelligence. The United States killed tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands in Iraq in the first Gulf War through their brutal economic sanctions. They killed tens of thousands. They're responsible for killing tens of thousands of Yemenis currently in the biggest humanitarian crisis by giving weapons to Saudi Arabia, which are using it against the Yemeni civilians in their fight against the Houthis. Tens of thousands killed in Afghanistan in a 20-year war, the longest war in U.S. history, which basically served no purpose whatsoever, because the Taliban are now in control of the country.
And there was up by coast. Why do we?
I'm not even talking about Syria or Libya. I'm leaving them out, just picking on these people. Look at how many people are responsible for authorizing these wars based on what?
attack that particular
Because the
camp?
intelligence was that we believed that bin Laden and his associates were going to be there. We went after as many as we could and as high as we could. We didn't know whether he'd be there for sure. We hoped he would be there. He slipped away, apparently.
Did you consider putting a special ops team, a relatively small special ops team, just to get eyes on the prize, just to be able to be sort of forward air controllers to tell, rather than having to rely on satellites or tribals to tell you where bin Laden was?
I think that the judgment was that it was a more discreet operation, likely to be less compromised than if we tried to put people on the ground at that time. Again, you can question that judgment, but that was a recommendation coming that had the best chance of success of getting him.
We're going to
Right, now, here's what happened here, right? So you talk about that wedding procession or meeting with Saudi princes, right? That I talked about before. I think it was a wedding or there was a meeting, right? In which nobody wanted to be responsible for bombing it or trying to capture and renditioning them, which was not a no-go anyway, was impossible. And nobody wanted to do it. The CIA rejected the idea anyway. So the State Department basically tried to employ Tenet, and Tenet is basically an opportunist. He's a bureaucrat. He's not a real agent by any means. So he basically told Cofer Black of the Counterterrorism Center to basically come up or draft an outline regarding, trying to get to bin Laden. And, I spoke about this before in 1999. Cofer Black outlined, it was called The Plan, some title, in which they were to try to get informants in Al Qaeda and having the CIA through the Special Activities Division to get close to these training camps in Afghanistan where Al Qaeda was to be training at, and the hopes of gaining informants in Al Qaeda. Now, this is going to take a long ass time, but that was the idea anyway. So
I'm here from Secretary.
and later on, it became Operation Jawbreaker, which basically was a capture or kill operation of Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda. And I did a video about this, and I even did a podcast about it. So it's a really interesting operation, by the way.
Rumsfeld a little bit, and I want to ask you one last question in that regard. During the transition, you briefed the Secretary on 50 items and also briefed him on Al Qaeda. And perhaps he's going to recall it, but in a previous interview, he didn't remember much about the briefing on Al Qaeda. Can you offer any reasons why?
I listed, since I had limited time with Secretary Rumsfeld, I knew that he was quite familiar with the office, and what I tried to do is to give him the whole panoply in a very short period of time, knowing that there were going to be specific briefings on by the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs and others, Joint Staff, the National Security Advisor, and also the CIA. So we tried to cover as many subjects as we could. The very first subject had to do with a major threat to the United States involving Al Qaeda or bin Laden's associates, but an extremist group launching an attack domestically. I don't think I want to talk about it any more than that, but that was a number one item. Everything else on the item were issues that I thought he should at least be aware of, but number one was my concern. And frankly, I came to Capitol Hill. I met, I think, with just a total of perhaps 8 to 10 people to talk about the threat that existed and what needed to be done to help counter it. But I don't think I want to talk about it more.
Let me say in conclusion, Mr. Secretary, as I said at the beginning, Goldwater Nichols Special Operations Command, the men and women of the Air Force, Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard that won the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, that was your troops, and you ought to feel very proud of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, let me tell you something. That's what got Cohen in trouble, and that's why bin Laden committed a fatwa on Cohen, because of the fact that he was quite aggressive at the end in 1999 to attack bin Laden in Afghanistan, and that's why he was put on the fatwa. Incidentally enough, hours before the 9/11 attacks, Bill Clinton told an audience in Australia that he missed a chance to kill Osama bin Laden, in which I'll read a quote, and this was recorded by former Liberal Party head Michael Kroger, and it was aired by Sky News. Quote, "I'm just saying, if I were Osama bin Laden, he's a very smart guy. I spent a lot of time thinking about him, and I nearly got him once. I nearly got him, and I could have killed him. but I would have to destroy a little town called Kandahar in Afghanistan and kill 300 innocent women and children, and then I would have been no better than him, and so I didn't do it, end quote. Now, that's the incident I was talking about regarding, I think it was a wedding or a meeting, but there were Saudi princes. And what happened was that this was the deciding factor of Clinton going against, because he had a good relationship with the Saudi Arabian king, King Fahd at the time, and that they had shared intelligence about bin Laden and Al Qaeda in the mid 1990s. So Clinton wasn't ignorant about bin Laden. In fact, he was much more informed about Al Qaeda and bin Laden than Bush ever was, even after 9/11. So that's what made Clinton really a dubious character, because here was Bill Clinton, who had numerous chances to kill or capture even bin Laden as early as 1993, 94. And, as I told you, that there were certain CIA officials, CIA case officers who basically blamed Clinton for not taking the opportunity to do so. So take it for what it's worth. I'll see you in the next video, guys. Take care.